I literally don't believe it. Yeah, that's all it takes. Open up the logic. How often it is that the angry man rages denial of what his inner self is telling him. The collected sayings of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan. The crowd in the cavern assembly chamber radiated that packed feeling Jessica had sensed the day Paul killed Jameis. There was murmuring nervousness in the voices. Little cliques gathered like knots among the robes. Jessica tucked a message cylinder beneath her robe as she emerged to the ledge from Paul's private quarters. She felt rested after the long journey up from the south, but still rankled that Paul would not yet permit them to use the captured ornithopters. "We do not have full control of the air," he had said, "and we must not become dependent upon off-world fuel. Both fuel and aircraft must be gathered and saved for the day of maximum effort." Paul stood with a group of the younger men near the ledge. The pale light of the glow globes gave the scene a tinge of unreality. It was like a tableau, but with the added dimension of worn smells, the whispers, the sounds of shuffling feet. She studied her son, wondered why he had not yet trotted out his surprise. Gurney Halleck. Thought of Gurney Halleck disturbed her with its memories of an easier past, days of love and beauty with Paul's father. Stilgar waited with a small group of his own at the other end of the ledge. There was a feeling of inevitable dignity about him, the way he stood without talking. We must not lose that man, Jessica thought. Paul's plan must work. Anything else would be highest tragedy. She strode down the ledge, passing Stilgar without a glance, stepped down into the crowd. A way was made for her as she headed toward Paul, and silence followed her. She knew the meaning of the silence, the unspoken questions of the people, awe of the Reverend Mother. The young men drew back from Paul as she came up to him, and she found herself momentarily dismayed by the new deference they paid him. "All men beneath your position covet your station," went the Bene Gesserit axiom, but she found no covetousness in these faces. They were held at a distance by the religious ferment around Paul's leadership, and she recalled another Bene Gesserit saying, "Prophets have a way of dying by violence." Paul looked at her. "It's time," she said, and passed the message cylinder to him. One of Paul's companions, bolder than the others, glanced across at Stilgar, said, "Are you still going to call him out, Muad'Dib?" "Now's the time for sure. They'll think you a coward if you—" "Who dares call me out?" Paul demanded. His hand flashed to his crisp knife hilt. Bated silence came over the group, spreading out into the crowd. "There's work to do," Paul said, as the man drew back from him. Paul turned away, shouldered through the crowd to the ledge, leapt lightly up to it, and faced the people. "Do it!" someone shrieked. Murmurs and whispers arose behind the shriek. Paul waited for silence. It came slowly amidst scattered shuffling and coughs. When it was quiet in the cavern, Paul lifted his chin, spoke in a voice that carried to the farthest corners. "You are tired of waiting," Paul said. Again he waited while the cries of response died out. Indeed they are tired of waiting, Paul thought. He hefted the message cylinder, thinking of what it contained. His mother had showed it to him, explaining how it had been taken from a Harkonnen courier. The message was explicit. Raban was being abandoned by his own resources here on Arrakis. To his own resources. He would not call for help or reinforcements. He could not. Again Paul raised his voice. "You think it's time I called out Stilgar and changed the leadership of the troops?" Before they could respond, Paul hurled his voice at them in anger. "Do you think the Lisan al-Gaib that stupid?" There was a stunned silence. "He's accepting the religious mantle," Jessica thought. "He must not do it." "It's the way," someone shouted. Paul spoke dryly, probing the emotional undercurrents. "Ways change." An angry voice lifted from a corner of the cavern. "We'll say what's to change." There were scattered shouts of agreement throughout the throng. "As you wish," Paul said, and Jessica heard the subtle intonations he used, the power of voice she had taught him. "You will say," he agreed, "but first you will hear my say." Stilgar moved along the ledge, his bearded face impassive. "That is the way too," he said. "The voice of any Fremen may be heard in council. Paul Muad'Dib is a Fremen." "The good of the tribe. That is the most important thing, eh?" Paul asked. Still with that flat-voiced dignity, Stilgar said, "Thus our steps are guided." "All right," Paul said. "Then who rules this troop out of our tribe? And who rules all the tribes and troops through the fighting instructors we've trained in the Weirding Way?" Paul waited, looking over the heads of the throng. No answer came. Presently he said, "Does Stilgar rule all this? He says himself that he does not. Do I rule? Even Stilgar does my bidding on occasion. And the sages, the wisest of the wise, listen to me and honor me in council." There was shuffling silence among the crowd. "So," Paul said, "does my mother rule?" He pointed down to Jessica in her black robes of office among them. "Stilgar and all the other troop leaders ask her advice in almost every major decision. You know this. But does a Reverend Mother walk the sand or lead a razzia against the Harkonnens?" Frowns creased the foreheads of those Paul could see, but still there were angry murmurs. This is a dangerous way to do it, Jessica thought, but she remembered the message cylinder and what it implied, and she saw Paul's intent. Go right to the depth of their uncertainty, dispose of that, and all the rest must follow. "No man recognizes leadership without the challenge in the combat, eh?" Paul asked. "That's the way," someone shouted. "What's our goal?" Paul asked. "To unseat Raban, the Harkonnen beast, and remake our world into a place where we may raise our families in happiness amidst an abundance of water. Is this our goal?" "Hard tasks need hard ways," someone shouted. "Do you smash your knife before a battle?" Paul demanded. "I say this as fact, not meaning it as a boast or challenge. There isn't a man here, Stilgar included, who could stand against me in single combat. This is Stilgar's own admission. He knows it, so do all you." Again the angry mutters lifted from the crowd. "Many of you have been with me on the practice floor," Paul said. "You know this isn't an idle boast. I say it because it's fact known to us all, and I'd be foolish not to see it for myself. I began training in these ways earlier than you did, and my teachers were tougher than any you've ever seen. How else do you think I bested Jameis at an age when your boys are still fighting only mock battles?" He's using the voice well, Jessica thought, but that's not enough with these people. They've good insulation against vocal control. He must catch them also with logic. "So," Paul said, "we come to this." He lifted the message cylinder, removed its scrap of tape. "This was taken from a Harkonnen courier. Its authenticity is beyond question. It is addressed to Raban. It tells him that his request for new troops is denied, that his spice harvest is far below quota, that he must wring more spice from Arrakis with the people he has." Stilgar moved up beside Paul. "How many of you see what this means?" Paul asked. Stilgar saw it immediately. "They're cut off!" someone shouted. Paul pushed message and cylinder into his sash. From his neck he took a braided Shiga-wire cord and removed the ring from the cord, holding the ring aloft. "This was my father's ducal signet," he said. "I swore never to wear it again until I was ready to lead my troops over all of Arrakis and claim it as my rightful fief." He put the ring on his finger, clenched his fist. Utter stillness gripped the cavern. "Who rules here?" Paul asked. He raised his fist. "I rule here. I rule on every square inch of Arrakis. This is my ducal fief, whether the Emperor says yea or nay. He gave it to my father, and it comes to me through my father." Paul lifted himself onto his toes, settled back to his heels. He studied the crowd, feeling their temper. Almost, he thought. "There are men here who will hold positions of importance on Arrakis when I claim those imperial rights which are mine," Paul said. "Stilgar is one of those men. Not because I wish to bribe him, not out of gratitude, though I am one of many here who owe him life for life. No, but because he's wise and strong, because he governs this troop by his own intelligence and not just by rules. Do you think me stupid? Do you think I'll cut off my right arm and leave it bloody on the floor of this cavern, just to provide you with a circus?" Paul swept a hard gaze across the throng. "Who is there to say I am not the rightful ruler on Arrakis? Must I prove it by leaving every Fremen tribe in the Urg without a leader?" Beside Paul, Stilgar stirred, looked at him questioningly. "Will I subtract from our strength when we need it most?" Paul asked. "I am your ruler, and I say to you that it is time we stopped killing off our best men and started killing our real enemies, the Harkonnens." In one blurred motion, Stilgar raised his crysknife out and pointed over the heads of the throng. "Long live Duke Paul Muad'Dib!" he shouted. A deafening roar filled the cavern, echoed and re-echoed. They were cheering and chanting, "Yahya Chohoda! Muad'Dib! 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 Yahwa Chohoda!" Jessica translated it to herself. Long live the fighters of Muad'Dib. The scene she and Paul and Stilgar had cooked up between them had worked as they'd planned. The tumult died slowly. When silence was restored, Paul faced Stilgar, said, "Kneel, Stilgar." Stilgar dropped to his knees on the ledge. "Hand me your crysknife," Paul said. Stilgar obeyed. This was not as we planned it, Jessica thought. "Repeat after me," Paul said, and he called up the words of his investiture as he had heard his own father use them. "I, Stilgar, take this knife from the hands of my duke." "I, Stilgar, take this knife from the hands of my duke," Stilgar said, and accepted the milky blade from Paul. "Where my duke commands, there I shall place this blade," Paul said. Stilgar repeated the words, speaking slowly and solemnly. Remembering the source of the right, Jessica blinked back tears, shook her head. "I know the reasons for this," she thought. "I shouldn't let it stir me." "I dedicate this blade to the cause of my duke and the death of his enemies, for as long as our blood shall flow," Paul said. Stilgar repeated it after him. "Kiss the blade," Paul ordered. Stilgar obeyed, then, in the Fremen manner, kissed Paul's knife arm. At a nod from Paul, he sheathed the blade, got to his feet. A sighing whisper of awe passed through the crowd, and Jessica heard the words, "The prophecy! A Bene Gesserit shall show the way, and the Reverend Mother shall see it." And from farther away, "She shows us through her son." "Stilgar leads this tribe," Paul said. "Let no man mistake that. He commands with my voice. What he tells you, it is as though I told you." Wise, Jessica thought. The tribal commander must not lose face among those who should obey him. Paul lowered his voice, said, "Stilgar, I want sandwalkers out this night and sea lagos sent to summon a council gathering. When you've sent them, bring Chot, Korba, and Othheim, and 2 other lieutenants of your own choosing. Bring them to my quarters for battle planning. We must have a victory to show the council of leaders when they arrive." Paul nodded for his mother to accompany him, led the way down off the ledge and through the throng toward the central passage and the living chambers that had been prepared there. As Paul pressed through the crowd, hands reached out to touch him. Voices called out to him. "My knife goes where Stilgar commands it, Paul Muad'Dib. Let us fight soon, Paul Muad'Dib. Let us wet our world with the blood of Harkonnens." Feeling the emotions of the throng, Jessica sensed the fighting edge of these people. They could not be more ready. "We are taking them at the crest," she thought. In the inner chamber, Paul motioned his mother to be seated, said, "Wait here," and he ducked through the hangings to the side passage. It was quiet in the chamber after Paul had gone, so quiet behind the hangings that not even the faint soughing of the wind pumps that circulated air in the CH penetrated to where he sat. "He's going to bring Gurney Halleck here," she thought, and she wondered at the strange mingling of emotions that filled her. Gurney and his music had been a part of so many pleasant times on Caladan before the move to Arrakis. She felt that Caladan had happened to some other person. In the nearly 3 years since then, she had become another person. Having to confront Gurney forced a reassessment of the changes. Paul's coffee service, the fluted alloy of silver and jasmium that he had inherited from Jameis, rested on a low table to her right. She stared at it, thinking of how many hands had touched that metal. Shawnee had served Paul from it within the month. What can his desert woman do for a duke except serve him coffee, she asked herself. She brings him no power, no family. Paul has only one major chance, to ally himself with a powerful great house, perhaps even with the imperial family. There are marriageable princesses, after all, and every one of them Bene Gesserit trained. Jessica imagined herself leaving the rigors of Arrakis for the life of power and security she could know as a mother of royal consort. She glanced at the thick hangings that obscured the rock of this cavern cell, thinking of how she had come here, riding amidst a host of worms, the palanquins and platforms piled high with necessities for the coming campaign. As long as Shawnee lives, Paul will not see his duty, Jessica thought. She has given him a son, and that is enough. A sudden longing to see her grandson, the child whose likeness carried so much of the grandfather's features, so like Leto, swept through her. Jessica placed her palms against her cheeks, began the ritual breathing that stilled emotion and clarified the mind, then bent forward from the waist in the devotional exercise that prepared the body for the mind's demands. Paul's choice of this cave of birds as his command post could not be questioned, she knew. It was ideal, and to the north lay Wind Pass opening onto a protected village in a cliff-walled sink. It was a key village, home of artisans and technicians, maintenance center for an entire Harkonnen defensive sector. A cough sounded outside the chamber hangings. Jessica straightened, took a deep breath, exhaled slowly. "Enter," she said. Draperies were flung aside and Gurney Halleck bounded into the room. She had only time for a glimpse on his face, with an odd grimace. Then he was behind her, lifting her to her feet, and one brawny arm beneath her chin. "Gurney, you fool, what are you doing?" she demanded. Then she felt the touch of the knife tip against her back. Chill awareness spread out from that knife tip. She knew in that instant that Gurney meant to kill her. Why? She could think of no reason, for he wasn't the kind to turn traitor, but she felt certain of his intentions. Knowing it, her mind churned. Here was no man to be overcome easily. He was a killer, wary of the voice, wary of every combat stratagem, wary of every trick of death and violence. Here was an instrument she herself had helped train with subtle hints and suggestions. "You thought you had escaped, eh, witch?" Gurney snarled. Before she could turn the question over in her mind or try to answer, the curtains parted and Paul entered. Here he is, Paul broke off, taking in the tensions of the scene. "You will stand where you are, my lord," Gurney said. "What?" Paul shook his head. Jessica started to speak, felt the arm tighten against her throat. "You will speak only when I permit it, witch," Gurney said. "I want only one thing from you, for your son to hear it, and I am prepared to send this knife into your heart by reflex at the very first sign of a counter against me. Your voice will remain in a monotone. Certain muscles you will not tense or move. You will act with the most extreme caution to gain yourself a few more seconds of life, and I assure you, these are all you'll have." Paul took a step forward. "Gurney, man, what is—" "Stop right where you are," Gurney snapped. "One more step and she's dead." Paul's hand slipped to his knife hilt. He spoke in a deadly quiet. "You had best explain yourself, Gurney." "I swore an oath to slay the betrayer of your father," Gurney said. "Do you think I can forget the man who rescued me from a Harkonnen slave pit, gave me freedom, life, and honor? Gave me friendship, a thing I prized above all else? I have his betrayer under my knife. No one can stop me from—" "You couldn't be more wrong, Gurney," Paul said. And Jessica thought, so that's it. What irony. "Wrong, am I?" Gurney demanded. "Let us hear it from the woman herself. And let her remember that I have bribed and spied and cheated to confirm this charge. I've even pushed Samuta on a Harkonnen guard captain to get part of the story." Jessica felt the arm at her throat ease slightly, but before she could speak, Paul said, "The betrayer was Yue. I tell you this once, Gurney. The evidence is complete, cannot be controverted. It was Yue. I do not care how you came by your suspicion, for it can be nothing else. But if you harm my mother—" Paul lifted his crysknife from its scabbard, held the blade in front of him. "I'll have your blood." "Yue was a conditioned medic, fit for a royal house," Gurney snarled. "He could not turn traitor." "I know a way to remove that conditioning," Paul said. "Evidence," Gurney insisted. "The evidence is not here," Paul said. "It's in Tabor CH, far to the south. But if—" "This is a trick," Gurney snarled, and his arm tightened on Jessica's throat. "No trick, Gurney," Paul said, and his voice carried such a note of terrible sadness that the sound tore at Jessica's heart. "I saw the message captured from the Harkonnen agent," Gurney said. "The note pointed directly at—" "I saw it too," Paul said. My father showed it to me at the night and explained why it had to be a Harkonnen trick aimed at making him suspect the woman he loved. Ah, Gurney said. You've not— Be quiet, Paul said, and the monotone stillness of his words carried more command than Jessica had ever heard in another voice. He has the great control, she thought. Gurney's arm trembled against her neck. The point of the knife at her back moved with uncertainty. What you have not done, Paul said, is heard my mother sobbing in the night over her lost duke. You have not seen her eyes stab flame when she speaks of killing Harkonnens. So he has listened, she thought. Tears blinded her eyes. What you have not done, Paul went on, is remembered the lessons you learned in a Harkonnen slave pit. You speak of pride in my father's friendship. Didn't you learn the difference between Harkonnen and Atreides so that you could smell a Harkonnen trick by the stink they left on it? Didn't you learn that Atreides' loyalty is bought with love, while the Harkonnen coin is hate? Couldn't you see through the very nature of this betrayal? But Yue, Gurney muttered. The evidence we have is Yue's own message to us admitting his treachery, Paul said. I swear this to you by the love I hold for you, a love I will still hold, even after I leave you dead on this floor. Hearing her son, Jessica marveled at the awareness in him, the penetrating insight of his intelligence. My father had an instinct for his friends, Paul said. He gave his love sparingly, but with never an error. His weakness lay in misunderstanding hatred. He thought anyone who hated Harkonnens could not betray him. He glanced at his mother. She knows this. I've given her my father's message that he never distrusted her. Jessica felt herself losing control, bit at her lower lip. Seeing the stiff formality in Paul, she realized what these words were costing him. She wanted to run to him, cradle his head against her breast as she had never done. But the arm against her throat had ceased its trembling. The knife pointed at her back, pressed still and sharp. One of the most terrible moments in a boy's life, Paul said, is when he discovers his father and mother are human beings who share a love that he can never quite taste. It's a loss, an awakening to the fact that the world is there and here, and we are in it alone. The moment carries its own truth. You can't evade it. I heard my father when he spoke of my mother. She's not the betrayer, Gurney. Jessica found her voice, said, Gurney, release me. There was no special command in the words, no trick to play on his weaknesses, but Gurney's hand fell away. She crossed to Paul, stood in front of him, not touching him. Paul, she said, there are other awakenings in this universe. I suddenly see how I've used you and twisted you and manipulated you to set you on a course of my choosing. A course I had to choose, if that's any excuse, because of my own training. She swallowed past a lump in her throat, looked up into her son's eyes. Paul, I want you to do something for me. Choose the course of happiness. You're Desert Woman. Marry her if that's your wish. Defy everyone and everything to do this, but choose your own course. She broke off, stopped by the low sound of muttering behind her. Gurney! She saw Paul's eyes directed beyond her, turned. Gurney stood in the same spot, but had sheathed his knife, pulled the robe away from his breast to expose the slick grayness of an issue stillsuit, the type the smugglers traded for among the C.H. Warrens. Put your knife right here in my breast, Gurney muttered. I say kill me and have done with it. I've besmirched my name. I've betrayed my own duke. The finest— Be still, Paul said. Gurney stared at him. Close that robe and stop acting like a fool, Paul said. I've had enough foolishness for one day. Kill me, I say, Gurney raged. You know me better than that, Paul said. How many kinds of an idiot do you think I am? Must I go through this with every man I need? Gurney looked at Jessica, spoke in a forlorn, pleading note, so unlike him. Then you, my lady, please, you kill me. Jessica crossed to him, put her hands on his shoulders. Gurney, why do you insist the Atreides must kill those they love? Gently she pulled the spread robe out of his fingers, closed and fastened the fabric over his chest. Gurney spoke brokenly. But you thought you were doing a thing for Leto, she said, and for this I honor you. My lady, Gurney said. He dropped his chin to his chest, squeezed his eyelids closed against the tears. Let us think of this as a misunderstanding among old friends, she said, and Paul heard the soothers, the adjusting tones in her voice. It's over, and we can be thankful we'll never again have that sort of misunderstanding between us. Gurney opened eyes bright with moisture, looked down at her. The Gurney Halleck I knew was a man adept with both blade and balisette, Jessica said. It was the man of the balisette I most admired. Doesn't that Gurney Halleck remember how I used to enjoy listening by the hour while he played for me? Do you still have a balisette, Gurney? I've a new one, Gurney said. Brought from Chusuk, a sweet instrument. Plays like a genuine Varota, though there's no signature on it. I think myself it was made by a student of Varota's who... He broke off. What can I say to you, my lady? Here we prattle about... Not prattle, Gurney, Paul said. He crossed to stand beside his mother, eye to eye with Gurney. Not prattle, but a thing that brings happiness between friends. I'd take it a kindness if you'd play for her now. Battle planning can wait for a little while. We'll not be going into the fight till tomorrow, at any rate. I'll get my balisette, Gurney said. It's in the passage. He stepped around them and through the hangings. Paul put a hand to his mother's arm, found that she was trembling. It's over, Mother, he said. Without turning her head, she looked up at him from the corners of her eyes. Over? Of course, Gurney? Oh, yes. She lowered her gaze. The hangings rustled as Gurney returned with his balisette. He began tuning it, avoiding their eyes. The hangings and the walls dulled the echoes, making the instrument sound small and intimate. Paul led his mother to a cushion, seated her there with her back to the thick draperies of the wall. He was suddenly struck by how old she seemed to him, with the beginnings of desert dried lines on her face, the stretching at the corners of her blue-veiled eyes. She's tired, he thought. We must find some way to ease her burdens. Gurney strummed a chord. Paul glanced at him, said, I've things that need my attention. Wait here for me. Gurney nodded. His mind seemed far away, as though he dwelled for this moment beneath the open skies of Caladan, with cloud fleece on the horizon promising rain. Paul forced himself to turn away, let himself out through the heavy hangings over the side passage. He heard Gurney take up a tune behind him, and paused a moment outside the room to listen to the muted music. Orchards and vineyards, and full-breasted Horus, and a cup overflowing before me. Why do I babble of battles, and mountains reduced to dust? Why do I fear these tears? Heavens stand open, and scatter their riches. My hands need but gather their wealth. Why do I think of an ambush, and poison in a molten cup? Why do I feel my years? Love's arm beckon, with their naked delights, and Eden's promise of ecstasies. Why do I remember the scars, dreams of old transgressions, and why do I sleep with fears? A robed Fedaykin courier appeared from a corner of the passage ahead of Paul. The man had hood thrown back and fastenings of his stillsuit hanging loose about his neck, proof that he had come just now from the open desert. Paul motioned for him to stop, left the hangings of the door, and moved down the passage to the courier. The man bowed, hands clasped in front of him the way he might greet a reverend mother or Sayadina of the rites. He said, Muad'Dib, leaders are beginning to arrive for the council. So soon? There are the ones Stilgar sent for earlier when it was thought... He shrugged. I see. Paul glanced back toward the faint sound of the balisette, thinking of the old song that his mother favored. An odd stretching of happy tune and sad words. Stilgar will come here soon with others. Show them where my mother waits. I will wait here, Muad'Dib, the courier said. Yes, do that. Paul pressed past the man toward the depths of the cavern, headed for the place that each cavern had. A place near its water-holding basin. There'd be a small Shai-Hulud in this place, a creature no more than 9 meters long, kept stunted and trapped by surrounding water ditches. The Maker, after emerging from its little Maker vector, avoided water for the poison it was, and the drowning of a Maker was the greatest Fremen's secret, because it produced the substance of their union, the water of life, the poison that could only be changed by a Reverend Mother. The decision had come to Paul while he faced the tension of danger to his mother. No line of the future he had ever seen carried that moment of peril from Gurney Halleck. The future, the gray cloud future, with its feeling that the entire universe rolled toward a boiling nexus, hung around him like a phantom world. I must see it, he thought. His body had slowly acquired a certain spice tolerance that made prescient's visions fewer and fewer, dimmer and dimmer. The solution appeared obvious to him. I will drown the Maker. We will see now whether I'm the Kwisatz Haderach who can survive the test that the Reverend Mothers have survived. That should do it.